All right. Good afternoon, Nick. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I am doing good. So I've got your resume here in front of me. Now, one thing I want to ask you before we get started, it looks like your address is still Ohio. Are you relocating to
Uh,
Florida?
I'm actually currently located in Florida. Does it say that on the resume or
It
uh
it says Bowling, Ohio, but that's okay. So you're already in Florida. Where are you at in Florida?
I'm in Palmetto.
Fantastic. All right. So tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about yourself and what you were doing in your last position.
Okay. Recently moved here to Florida in the past year. I was completing my MBA at LSU after COVID. It became just completely virtual online.
Okay.
And then while I was finishing up that, I was actually contacted by Amazon.
Okay.
They said, "Hey, you want to come down here to Florida? Do a area manager job. You have some experience in operations. We'd like to see what you got." I've been doing that. I was doing that till about February.
Okay.
At the end of February this year, I was UTR, so basically I was under for the entire operations under the roof, and I'd basically oversee the entire package from the distribution center
Okay.
to making sure that it got on the van, which would be delivered to you, the customer.
Fantastic.
And I would be managing employees, running analysis, working with tons of data. That's something that really interested me in this job or this position. And then I just really kind of wanted to expand at that job doing projects and things like that.
Okay.
That was something I really focused on because that's actually always been my passion before that. As you see, I was at Cooper.
Yep.
And the reason for leaving that job was because of COVID. I was actually going to be moved up to their project manager, but they were cutting resources and all that, trying to cut costs. And they said, "Hey, Nick, we were going to give you this position, but as of right now, we can't really afford that. You can stay on as supervisor, or if you
Okay.
really want this position, then it's not really the thing for you. Then that's okay." They were very transparent about that. So at Amazon, I kind of got the opportunity to focus on a lot of projects, data analysis, working with the hourly employees, helping the assistant supervisors. And then at that time, actually, in the last 6 months, I was elevated to be an operations manager.
Okay.
But because we had so many area managers leave, I became the acting leadership at the site, and I was visiting between sites in the area and also launching a new site in Sarasota. But because we had a lack of area managers, I had to wait to be elevated to that operations position. That's
Okay.
how Amazon does it. So you have to wait for someone to be able to take your position. Well, we didn't even have coworkers at my position.
Okay. So, Nick, if
So
you don't mind, if I can
yeah,
ask you a couple of questions as well, also too, because I'm very intrigued, especially since you applied to a data position, to hear about
yes,
the data that you managed, what type of numbers you were looking at, what volume, what software programs you were using. So, I'd
yeah.
like to dive into that a little bit more.
Okay, mainly I was using Microsoft Project and
Okay.
certain AWS services.
Okay.
Uh, some things I can't discuss just because on the project side I was mainly working for things that dealt with actually OTR, so that'd be on the road,
Great.
and working with projects on band. We'd be looking at data such as revenue that we were even making, uh, time analysis, looking at overall volume on production,
Right.
just between the distribution center for what we could produce UTR, so under the roof,
Okay.
and how much volume was passing through that, and then also seeing the measurables on the delivery side.
Fantastic.
So that's kind of like the data I was looking at, and something that I personally really was emphasized was employee safety.
Okay.
And so I was looking at a lot of metrics that dealt with work related injuries, uh, certain things in regard to that, and how we could kind of cut back on things on like help with safety and cut down on the amount of repetitive injuries,
Okay.
which is
Great.
a common thing at Amazon. And just looking at seeing, because you're doing a lot of bending over, picking out these packages, a lot of repetitive movements. So a lot of the data I looked at was things that dealt with volume along with the number of employees and then how those workplace incidents were related. And then,
Fantastic.
yeah.
So now, Nick, with this particular position that you've applied for, so taking your
Mhm.
skills of managing data, identifying, key indicators that are sticking out
Yeah.
for areas of improvement, This particular position is going to be dealing with data from a marketing sense to make companies more profitable. So,
Yes.
how will you take the skills that you learned at Amazon and move them over to a different industry, completely into a marketing sense? Tell me a little bit about your plan there.
So there's a lot of things that could translate over with Amazon. So for cutting cost, every little single thing that you're doing, you mentioned KPIs, but every single little thing that an employee is doing can be used to cut cost. Exactly, and every little second counts, especially at Amazon.
Fantastic.
So if there's anywhere that I can see, I love looking at data. It's like one of my favorite things. I know it's a marketing area, but I was like, oh, I really like project data analysis, all that.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, well, if I see, something like revenue isn't quite adding up, there's things that we can change a little bit. Or, there's I had to partner with certain stakeholders at Amazon,
Yep.
and there's things where, whatever company this would be with, and I said, hey, in relation to stakeholders, where can we work with to get the most looking at this data? Who can we partner with to get the most out of this and be most beneficial?
Fantastic.
And so I would use data visualization, things like pivot tables too,
Great.
and basically come up with something like, hey, why do we have 20 employees where 5 employees could actually be doing this instead? And I think that kind of translates over to marketing, because you need to overutilize, and you also want to make sure that you're not underutilizing resources.
Fantastic. Now, Nick, at this stage in your career, what is the most important thing to you about the next company that you work for?
The most important thing to me is work-life balance. The reason I ended up leaving Amazon was, as I said, I was elevated to operations, like operations manager, but I was waiting for employees to come in that would be, at area manager. And I was interviewing for that, but the onboarding process was going to take an additional 6 more months.
Yep.
So it would probably be about a whole year before I'd be completely elevated to the next position. And my son, he just turned a year and a half old,
Yep.
and I pretty much, honestly, I haven't been able to be around for my son a lot. So,
Yeah,
um,
Amazon's a pretty strenuous schedule. I'm very
yeah,
familiar with their lack of work-life balance, which,
yeah.
as
So,
wonderful as Amazon is, that's why actually a lot of folks end up leaving there. The
yeah.
best thing though is you probably got one of the best trainings and foundations from a corporate
Oh,
entity.
no,
So
completely,
that's really going to
completely.
set you up nicely for success in this next role. And this next position that you applied for is a remote model. You
Okay,
have availability to go to the office. They've set it up beautifully and fantastic to encourage folks to come in as much as they see fit, but it is also not required. So you can
okay,
be at home with your son and dive into your duties. So I think that'd be a really nice opportunity for you. Now, Nick, I'm going to
yeah,
go ahead and turn off the recording portion of this interview because my client only has me record a portion to
okay.
send out, but I'm going to chat with you a little bit more if that sounds good.
All right, yeah, that sounds great.